Zach Cregger is back from his impressive debut film Barbarian, with another horror movie about an entire classroom of children who mysteriously disappear. The expectations were high, and the buzz around the film seemed to match it, so let's see how we felt about weapons. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Hello, thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. This is a horror movie podcast. We get together, we talk about a movie, it's that simple. And today we're reviewing the new release from this past weekend, which is Weapons. A very mysterious movie, much like Barbarian, which is from the same director, Zach Cregger. But, you know, the trailer gave you a simple premise, but as I think most of us probably expected, there's a lot to discover in the movie and like what type of movie it really is by the end. So obviously we will start spoiler free. We'll give you some, you know, general impressions, stuff like that. And then we'll go into spoilers after a warning. If you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. If you're enjoying it on a podcast app, please do give us 5 stars, raise the average a little bit. Helps us out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get bonus episodes, bonus segments, and plus stuff for other shows. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So, yes. Barbarian was very good. Surprisingly so. Kind of came out of nowhere. Some actor from some comedy sketch show apparently can direct a horror movie and impressed everyone. And that was the story in 2022 when Barbarian came out. So, you know, he could have pivoted. Like, I mean, obviously he was doing comedy before he got to horror. He might have went back to comedy. He might have done something else. But he's done a second horror movie. He's got a horror movie planned for next year. So he's cemented himself in that transition into the horror world, much like a Jordan Peele. Which is funny because Jordan Peele apparently wanted to get the script to this movie and do it, but Cregger got his mitts on it apparently. So, yeah. Anyway, I assume you had high hopes, expectations going in.
Yeah, I would probably say this was, you know, one of my most anticipated of the year. Like you said, Barbarian was great. You know, kind of came out of nowhere, and you know, one of the most exciting things when you see like a really good debut is, you know, kind of going, okay, so what's up next for them? You know, and this one, I mean, honestly, like when we were kind of just hearing stuff about, like when we heard the title and stuff, like it really doesn't tell you much, but yeah, just kind of being like, oh, it's called Weapons, like that's kind of a weird name, and I wonder what that is like evoking, and so I was interested, but yeah, I didn't really know too much going in, and then you know, whenever they released a trailer, I thought it was a very well done trailer, which you know, it gives you like a very cool, creepy premise, but then doesn't really, you know, like a lot of trailers that, you know, nowadays like spoil too much or you know, ruin like any really good moments. So it was really fun, you know, going into this, you know, not knowing that much, and then also, you know, a few days before I started hearing that it's getting really good reviews, so yeah, that just kind of helped cement like you know, my excitement going in.
No, the title is a weird one because it does not sound like a horror movie. Even it sounds like some direct-to-video action movie that Bruce Willis made like a year before he retired. Like that's what it sounds like. But obviously with the cred behind it and like the creepy trailer and whatnot and premise, it was like, okay, I mean, clearly there's something here. It's just kind of an interesting idea as to like what the title's ultimately going to mean and what we're doing here thematically and all the rest of it. So. Yeah, I mean, I was excited going in. The good reviews certainly helped. Not that I was like being doubtful, but there's always that chance, you know, you get the hot debut from someone, and then immediately you realize it was kind of like a fluke. Not well, fluke's maybe a harsh term, but I'm thinking of someone like Duncan Jones who made Moon, and to be fair, source code's pretty good. But then everything after that has been incredibly lacking, if not downright terrible. So.
You're not a Warcraft fan?
I'm sorry, Tim. I've not seen Warcraft, to be fair, but I
actually haven't seen it either.
I did see Mute though, what he did after that, and oh boy, Oh boy.
Okay.
So rough. And that was him doing a sci-fi movie again. That was him sort of like, oh, he's doing a sci. Oh, this is exciting. He's finally done with that Warcraft nonsense, and we're getting back to a Duncan Jones sci-fi movie, and it's like a turd. It is an actual turd. So,
Ooh.
you know, there's always a risk of that. There's always a risk of the hotshot new director, you know, not really having like the consistency in them. Like, okay, you know, or even like the Wachowskis who like did Bound, which is a great little thriller, and then The Matrix was the big hit. And then after that, it kind of felt like the writing just collapsed from under them, and everything after that wasn't as good. So, yeah, in fact, frankly, it's a lot of it downright garbage. So yeah, these are the concerns I have with a hot new director. Is that it's going to plummet and it's going to immediately be whatever. So we'll find out if that was the case here. Tim, what did you think of Weapons?
So just a few quick things going into this. One.
Okay, what did you have for breakfast in the day you saw the movie? Okay, I know you like to build up to it. Go on.
No, I just think it was kind of funny because I wasn't sure if I went with my wife and we weren't sure if we were gonna see this, or at least the showing we were planning on, which was like at 10 o'clock in the morning. Because we were running a little late with the kids and stuff, and it ended up being like about 10:15. We're like, should we still go? Like, it's 5 minutes after it was supposed to start. We're like, all right, let's just do it. Theater's not that far, so it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to drive to.
Don't you have like 30 minutes of ads and trailers before the movie actually starts?
Well, that's what I'm getting to because it's it just makes me laugh because we basically ended up being about 10 minutes late getting out the door. Takes us about 10 minutes to drive there, and then we like to get snacks and stuff, so there was like a pretty long line at the concession stand, and there's only like one person working, so it ended up taking us about 10 minutes to actually get our snacks. And like I was trying to get nervous because I was like, well, man, like I know there's lots of trailers and stuff, but I don't want to miss like come into the review and be like, oh, so what happened in the first like 5 minutes or whatever. But even with all that, like we're somewhere between like 30 and 40 minutes like late actually getting into the theater, and we got in like just as it was starting. So I mean, everyone always talks about how long this stuff is, but it's still just like, I don't know, like boggles my mind that you could be like 40 minutes late and not miss a thing. The other thing that was kind of weird was it was opening weekend and it was a popular movie, but like the theater wasn't like packed. Like this was like the first showing on a Saturday, but there's like a decent amount of people, and like so obviously there's kids and stuff like in the movie it takes place like classrooms and stuff.
Oh, I thought you meant in the theater. I was like, who's bringing their young kids to Weapons?
well here's the thing, like, so I don't know, at some point maybe 30-40 minutes in or something, like I started to hear like some kind of like muffled crying or something, and I thought like, oh, is this like something in the movie? Like, does maybe one of the characters have like a little baby brother or sister or something? And it wasn't. And then like I looked at the end of the aisle and someone had like literally bought their newborn into the theater, which, I mean, kudos to the kid. They were actually pretty quiet throughout the most of the movie. Like there's just one or two instances where they kind of like fussed a bit, but it was like a very kind of muted like like quick thing. But I just thought that was kind of crazy. I mean, I was excited to see the movie too. I don't know if I would have taken my child to go see it.
Take your child to go see a movie about a bunch of children disappearing. Yeah, it sounds like a winning idea. Do you know, that's never happened to me. I've never been in a theater and someone's brought a baby. It's just, I've never seen, like, it sounds like something that happens all the time in the US because I constantly see people complain about it.
It's so bizarre, especially like, I mean, one thing if you're going to see a kid's movie, I guess, but
oh sure, yeah,
yeah, like and this has definitely happened to me more than once where people bring like 4 or 5 year olds to like some R-rated thing or whatever, which I mean, I get it, like I spent a lot of time not being able to see stuff in theaters because you can't get babysitters or whatever.
To be fair, you're actually not allowed to do that here, like. If they're under 12, they can be 12, but if they're under 15 or 18, they can't get into those movies. So there's no bringing Like, there's no argument for it. So I guess that weans out some of it. But even like a 12, where technically a parent can bring a kid who's younger than 12, like I feel like I don't see people bringing babies. Like you know,
Yeah,
it's just I just don't see it.
And it's also, I mean, maybe if you have the best behaved kid in the world, but it seems kind of unpredictable. Like, I don't know, is a loud noise going to set them off and then they're going to start crying and then, like, you know, you better leave the theater at that point, or else that's, you know, pretty rude.
Yeah, same goes for your elderly grandfather. If you bring them, you don't know if a loud noise is going to set them off. So think twice.
I mean, I think I've told this story before, but I'll always remember when I saw Midsommar in the theater, and I guess I won't spoil anything if you haven't seen it, but there's a pretty pivotal scene where there's some violence that happens to an older person, and there was like someone in their probably 70s or 80s like in the theater that just like stood up and very loudly said to their friend, "I don't think I like this movie," and then like slowly started walking out.
Very slowly for that age.
Yeah.
Oh dear. All right.
So
are we at the movie now? Is it?
Yeah. So again, very excited going into this, and I'm very happy to say that I think my expectations were all not just met but exceeded. I thought this was a fantastic second outing from a director who I was already on board with before, but now I'm very on board with. It's funny you mentioned like Peele before. Obviously they have like the similarities because they both come from like sketch comedy, but I think it's also like very similar that they kind of both have these like very good breakout films, but they're kind of on like a smaller level. But then like for the follow-ups they kind of have like these much like larger, ambitious in scope kind of things, which I know some people are a bit more divided on Us, but I really liked it. But I mean, I think it's kind of similar where he's definitely I feel like trying to go for something a bit bigger, but I think everything in this movie was just working for me. I think all the performers are really great. I like the kind of the setup, how we're following like kind of each character, we're getting like their sides of the story and then kind of seeing how they like connect. And I thought pretty much everyone's like chapters or whatever you want to call them were all like really intriguing. I thought there was some like legitimate creepiness in the movie, and I wasn't really expecting this, but there is some extremely funny parts, including the ending, which I like legitimately had like tears running, maybe not tears, but like at least a tear like coming down my face because I was laughing so hard. And I was really happy with it. I think there's like a lot to get into it. That's probably a lot of stuff that's kind of hard to discuss without spoilers, but I think there's a lot of interesting clearly interesting ideas and stuff behind the movie. I don't know if you saw some of the online discourse. I know like there's some people that are like, I guess they're saying they're upset because like, well, it's a good movie, but it's not really about anything. But I think that's like crazy. I think it's like very clearly about something. I mean, maybe you might have different interpretations about what that is, but I think that's kind of weird to say that it's not a movie that has like stuff going on. But I mean, yeah, we'll get in on all of that. But I really, really enjoyed it. I was super happy with it. How'd you feel?
I mean, it's about something. I'll start with that. I did not see that criticism. Even if you just look at the surface level, it's a movie about this. We'll talk about that in spoilers. Anyway, obviously I was I really like Barbarian. I didn't like I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was really well directed and all that, but I didn't rate it a 10 like you did. I gave it a very solid 8 out of 10 when we talked about Barbarian. Right, I thought it was really good. I thought it was well directed. I thought the direction was the best part of it, and I enjoyed its kind of pivot from like just super suspenseful at the start to a bit more pulpy towards the end. And I get why that change won't work for everyone, but that's kind of what Barbarian did. So I was curious to see what this one was going to do in terms of its structure, in terms of its tone, in terms of all these things. And I think it's interesting that it does have a very, probably the most telling thing that you can say, oh, it's the same director as Barbarian, is the way that he structured the story. And the way that there's like a big chapter near the end that is like sort of giving you all the answers, because Barbarian kind of did the same thing, where there was like a big chapter, you know, about 2/3 or so into the movie, where it was like, here, this is where all the secrets are kind of revealed. So I definitely saw some comparisons between the two in that sense. And like you said, some humor more towards the end of the movie, kind of, maybe not as much as Barbarian, but Barbarian did shift the pulpy and felt a bit more like, oh, we're not going to do super serious tension as we did in the first act. We're going to sort of like do something that feels a bit, you know, goofier, but intentional kind of way. I think this maybe doesn't go as far as that, but I definitely got some of those vibes as well, where you're right, there is a couple of things towards the end where it's almost absurd, like just how it looks and what's happening. But did I like it? That's the question that you really asked. Yeah, it was excellent. I mean, I honestly there was like a little, not worry, but there was a little, just like the first 5 minutes, I think might be the weakest 5 minutes of the movie, just because it has to like set up what's happening. So one of the strengths that I thought Barbarian had that I loved about the start of that movie is that there's no setup or explanation. Woman just arrives on a street looking for an Airbnb, and there's just all this natural tension of like, oh, it's a creepy street, there's no one around. Oh, like, I'm a bit scared to go outside and go to the door. Oh, I can't get in. Oh, who's in the house? Like, there's just all this very natural, just nail-biting tension that's just constantly being introduced without having to explain anything, because everything's just natural in the scene. Everything just kind of comes out of it. And I think, again, there's like some specific sequences in this movie where those skills of like tension of who's on the other side of the door, is there someone out there, is there some, you know, like, there's those elements sprinkled throughout here. Barbarian just starts with like a solid block of that. This movie, though, because it's setting up this thing that's kind of already happened, is we get like narration from a child who's like, oh, this happened a town over and blah blah, and like, you know, I won't go into, yeah, we'll get to spoilers in a bit, but it kind of felt a lot more like this is necessary rather than like the best, like most interesting choice of how to convey this information. So I was a little bit worried during that first 5 minutes where there was like sort of like creepy lullaby music playing and this child narrating, and I thought, oh, I'm not loving like this choice. But the second that stopped, and the second we started just following the characters in the story, like the expert direction started just being there. The mystery of what actually happened was interesting. There's some seeds early on that I think actually kind of foreshadow what it's going to be, and I kind of did catch them, at least enough that, not so much that I would have placed bets on what it was, but certainly when they revealed it, I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense, because of, you know, things that you kind of like, you know, teased earlier. So, no, I liked it quite a bit. I might even, I think from a story perspective, I think it's stronger than Barbarian. Like, I think by the end, when you look at like what the whole thing's about and the whole idea of like what it's talking about, it feels a bit stronger to me. But you know, that's a conversation to be had. So,
sure.
No, very, very good.
Nice. Yeah, I agree too. Like when it first starts, you know, it's not like I was like, oh, this is horrible, but yeah, it definitely didn't suck me in. I guess like whatever you want to call it, like the little prologue or whatever. Because I guess maybe it does seem like, I don't want to say generic, but like I guess maybe the most basic, you know, part of the movie. But then, like you said, once it starts going into like, you know, these, you know, sections where we're following each character, I think you put it a good way where like, yeah, the expert, you know, directing kicks in and you're just like immediately sucked in. I don't know if I forget if he starts off right away where you're just kind of like following like the back of the person, but I don't know, it just feels like you're so into it, like you're just like on board and like ready to, you know, follow this story. And man, it feels like who's like the main actress? Is it Julie or Julia Garner?
Julia Garner, yeah.
Julie Garner. Okay. Man, this feels like just such like a 1080 from like The Wolfman, which we just watched, which I mean, you know, obviously it's not like she's bad in the movie. Like, you know, that movie, the problems are more like in the script, than her actual performance or whatever. But definitely that movie did kind of like, maybe leave a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. But like watching this, I was like, oh wait, no, like she's actually like great. like, it kind of felt like a little redemptive. And then I mean, obviously, like everyone in the movie is like really good. Like Josh Brolin, I thought played like a really interesting character.
What's so funny about Josh Brolin is that I'm sure I saw him in the trailers at one point, but I forgot. And the first time he's in this movie, you don't see his face; you just hear him speak from behind. And I'm like, that sounds like Josh Brolin, huh? And then didn't think about it. And then later on in the movie, when you finally actually get to see him properly, I was like, oh, it's Josh Brolin. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and everyone like did a really good job, and I just thought I like the format of the movie. I guess is what I'm saying, where like each story I found compelling. Like it was never like, all right, we're jumping to this character now, and it's like, oh, it's like I'm not as into it as much. Like I don't know, I thought they did a good job of making each one having like a really interesting story, and then part of the fun is finding how it's gonna connect and intertwine and stuff. Which I thought it was all done really well.
Yeah, that's something else that kind of comes from Barbarian, where Barbarian was kind of split into 3 or 4 with like chapter titles. This one kind of does that as well, but they're a little bit more interconnected. But it definitely feels like this is the style of which he's made at least these 2 movies. I don't think he's going to do that for his next one though, because his next one is Resident Evil, and we'll maybe talk about our expectations for that at the end of this. But I don't think this structure will work for that, so it'll be interesting to see how he handles that. But I think the characters are solid. And you've got all these different perspectives of like, okay, Julia Garner's a school teacher who is weirded out that this happened, but the town kind of is suspicious of her because like she's like the only connecting link between all the kids that have disappeared. You got Brolin playing a dad of one of the kids, so that's obviously quite a pivotal perspective we need. We've got Benedict Wong as the school principal. There's a local cop named Paul, who's kind of one of our main characters. And then there's also a junkie named James, who ends up being one of our prominent characters as well. So, it's... I think the shifting perspectives... Like, there's maybe 1 or 2 little things later on in the movie where these stories obviously all intersect at certain points, and sometimes when we go to a new character, we're kind of going like earlier in the timeline. And there is 1 or 2 points where I felt like there's just this sort of necessary clunkiness to like, oh, we're hitting a point that we've already seen in the other like character's perspective, so we have to kind of just like show a little bit of it and then cut ahead because we don't have to like sit through it again. So there's almost like a little bit of a like, how do we do this neatly where it feels smooth, but it doesn't feel like we're, because we don't want the audience to have to sit through the same like 3 minutes again of the exact same scene, So there is 1 or 2 times where it kind of felt like, okay, he's committed to this format, but it does come with these little things where he has to deal with like, how do we like present some of these scenes the same again, but in a different form, or somehow skip through them in a way that feels natural. So. But I mean, that's a very minor quibble. For the most part, the structure adds to the mystery, adds to the suspense, and makes you excited because, one little nugget in one chapter will like pose a question that makes you go, oh, what does that mean? And then it'll be like, next chapter, and we go to somewhere else, and we're a different part of the timeline, and we're like, oh no, I want to know more about that. But then it might like someone will say something in the next chapter that kind of links up with that thing that was interesting, and you're like, oh wait a minute. Like, the dots are connecting. Like, the red string's on the board, and I'm putting the pieces together, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I will give some credit to Cregger, because there's some stuff in this movie that I feel like we would normally complain about in other movies. There's some jump scares and like dream sequences and stuff, and it just goes to show you that like, that stuff isn't really bad, but it all comes down to like, the execution, like how it's being handled, like, does it feel cheap, is it effective, is it important to the story? And like I thought all of that was really like well done. Like like it's not like there's a jump scare every 5 minutes or whatever, but there was like a few sprinkled throughout the movie that I thought were legitimately effective. And then like there's some kind of like weird like dream sequences and stuff that I actually dug and didn't feel cheap. So it's you just always it's always nice to see like like someone that actually knows how to handle this stuff, and like I never really feel like I'm being like cheated or anything, like like they're just trying to do something for whatever cheapness sake to get a rise out of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two dream sequences. One I think is really well done. I think the other one is effectively shot, but is guilty of the we're not actually pretending this is a dream. And we're going to do the jump scare before they wake up, right? So I still felt that a little bit. I was still kind of like, okay, you've done that trope. Obviously, I'm more forgiving here because the movie's of such a high quality, and the story's so interesting. But they do pull that cheap trick once. But I will say that the other dream is like, I mean, one, it's clear that it's a dream from the start. There's no misleading the audience, and it's kind of it feeds into what the movie's going to, the idea of what the dreams are and why they're maybe have like the characters having the dream. So it kind of adds to the. I'm trying to dance around spoilers here. I'll just say it adds to like where we lead later on. So there's a purpose to it beyond just that we're having a creepy dream just because it's time for some jump scares, because we need to make sure we have jump scares like at regular intervals, and there was nothing here in the script at this point, so we made the dream sequence. It doesn't feel like that. There's a genuine purpose to it, and it motivates character action. So no real complaints on that front.
And let me ask you maybe like one last thing before we go into spoilers, but I guess ultimately, how did you feel like once we kind of arrive at the explanation, for what's going on and who's behind it and stuff? Because again, this is a movie where you really don't know much going into it, and I wasn't sure if we would find answers, if it would be kind of clearly spelled out, and there is very obvious answers about what's going on and stuff. But I'm curious if like, were you more into the mystery, and then when you find out what it is, you're kind of like, oh, okay, or were you like, oh no, this is like cool, I'm still on board?
I was definitely still on board. I think the answers are interesting because it's well executed, and the way it presents the answers being coming out, I think, is done in a very good gradual way, and then kind of like it comes with it this extra layer of horror that's a bit more real, that comes with the subtext on top of the actual just like surface level thing that's happening. But I also think that it's also like what it turns out to be is not a type of movie we get that often. So it was kind of like nice to realize, oh, we're getting a good one of those, and there's only really a couple of great examples, certainly in the last like 30, 40 years, anyway. So
sure,
I was into it. Like I think I was into like the answers to the mystery here. I think this is the thing that I think is better than Barbarian. I think this felt like a lot more natural and completely lived up to like making sense with everything. Whereas with Barbarian, there was like really cool mysteries presented early on about what's in the basement and all that. I'm trying not to spoil anything too much for that movie, but just in case you've not seen it, folks. But and I had fun with where they went in Barbarian, but I wouldn't say that the answers were like, oh, the most exciting, like, oh, you've blown my mind here. They're just, okay, this is kind of a fun, pulpier explanation that feels a bit more for entertainment's sake than it is about anything else. Whereas here, that entertainment factor's still there. There's still kind of a little bit of a pulpiness to the type of thing we're doing, but it feels like it fits in a lot better with what the movie's doing subtextually, but also just with what the mystery was in the first place. Because I also thought early on, like, are we going to get a concrete answer? Is this going to be a movie where there's a lot of ambiguity at the end, where it's like, oh, and we'll never know, why this thing happened for real? There's some hints and there's some teases, but who knows? Yeah. No, by the end of the movie, we know exactly why it happened. We the movie answers everything. So, but we'll get into all that in spoilers, of course. But no, I was very pleased with where it went. Like, it was one of those things where, like, I'm not going to say it's quite as strong as this in terms of the wow factor of it, But last year we did Exuma, and one of the fun things about that movie is that when you realize, oh, it's this type of movie in the second half, and you realize what it's really about, there's a rush of excitement to that. Now that was a very extreme example because the movie really does a great, like, just right-angled left turn into, like, awesome. Whereas this is not quite that, because it's kind of, you know, it's great to begin with, and then it kind of reveals something that makes sense based on what was seeded before. But there is kind of that, like, discovery of, oh, it's this type of movie, and that's interesting, you know? Like, I enjoy that. As long as the thing is satisfying, that's a very exciting, like, progression to go through in a movie, is to realize, oh, it's this type of movie. So
sure,
yeah, I had a good time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I you know, pretty much on the same page. Like, I was intrigued throughout, and then, you know, I guess the positive thing is, like, you know, the more answers we got, it never felt like it deflated the movie, where it's like,
no,
oh, okay, you know, it was just, you know, it's just keeping you going along for the ride.
Yeah. So we should get spoilers so we can get digging into everything. So spoilers for weapons, you've been warned. We're going to dive into it. And honestly, I don't know how, like I can remember the chapters fairly well, right? And, like, obviously there's some intersecting parts, and it may be tough to remember what was in what order, but I almost don't even know if we should talk about it in order, just because of the type of story it is. It may be easier and make more sense to start with what happened and then kind of just talk about individual segments after the fact. I'm not really sure. But what I will say is that, you know, early on, like, after it establishes, you know, okay, these 17 kids from this one classroom who are all aged about, I don't know, 8 or something. I don't know. I don't know American grades well enough to just know what age every kid is in the class. But they all disappear, and they all disappear in this very specific way, where at 2:17 a.m., all of them just left their house and just ran into the night. They just ran off, and that's what's in the trailer. That's like the setup in the trailer is, like, you know, these kids all disappear, and the school's been closed for a month while everything's been investigated, but they have to open back up eventually, and the parents have demanded answers. And the first character we focus on is Justine, Julia Garner's character, who is the school teacher for that class, and inherently she is being kind of harassed. Everyone's hurling abuse, demanding to know how she's involved, because she's the only link they have. So it's unfair to her, of course, and she's traumatized by the fact that all of her kids are the ones that disappeared, but also from the parents' perspective, she's the only link between them. So, you know.
I always like when movies do this kind of thing where, you know, like, I think, I guess it's kind of funny enough, kind of a comparison, but you know, Robert Eggers, you know, The Witch or The Vitch, like, I thought that just did such a good job of showing you how, like, paranoia can spiral, and you know, people can start, you know, accusing people of things. And this, I feel like, you know, this one we already start, you know, pretty, you know, deep into it, but I just thought it, you know, it did a good job of showing how this town, you know, would react this way. And it's very understandable. Like, obviously this teacher has nothing to do with what's going on, but, you know, it's such a dramatic thing to happen, and, like, you know, it's one of the worst things, like, you could imagine, like, you know, for a parent, and they want answers, and there's, like, absolutely nothing, you know, or there's, like, nothing anyone's able to do or find, so they have to find a scapegoat. I mean, it's like basically a witch hunt, which, you know, is, I'm sure probably, you know, intentional, because, you know.
You've referenced The Witch. You've called something a witch hunt. Keep it in your pants. We're not there yet, Tim. Right? We're not there yet. I know we're in spoilers, but you're waving your witch stick all over the place. I think what's interesting for me here is that this, like, first section, Justine's arguably got the biggest section, and maybe that's just because they're establishing a lot in her section, but I think this is the one where I felt the most of, like, the traditional, like, suspense from Barbarian, because this idea that, oh wait, are some of these parents going to be dangerous, or some of them following her? Because a lot of this first section, when she leaves this meeting at the school and people are yelling at her, is this idea of, like, you know, is she safe? Is someone coming after her? Because, you know, I think the Benedict Wong's character Marcus, he says hey, you should probably just go straight home and lay low if you've not got anywhere else to go. And I was like, I don't know. I feel like even home's not a good idea. Like, go and get a hotel somewhere where like no one will know you're there or something, because it feels like and the movie does this thing where it follows her into a store, and like it does this one-er where it's just following her back all the way in, and this is a recurring motif throughout the movie until she gets to where she's going, which is to get some booze. She's had a rough night, of course. She's feeling terrible, but this is very much the start of one of the main themes of the movie, which is not only just alcoholism, even though that's specifically name dropped, but even just addiction in general is a big theme here, because we've also got the junkie character as well, which is obviously just a different kind of addiction. And, we see her get the booze, but when she gets back out, someone's written witch on her car in red paint. And that was the moment, for the record, where I just kind of went, okay, obviously this is just someone, like, a parent or whoever accusing her of this because they're upset. But this is where my movie, like, brain just kind of went, oh, I bet it's a witch. Like, this is foreshadowing. This is absolutely foreshadowing. I bet there's some, if not a literal witch, there's something that's going to be akin to a witch. But no, there's a literal witch. Yeah. There's it's not her, but there's going to be a witch. So fun.
Yeah. And then I do like how these kind of little details are, like, scattered throughout the movie, because she comes out and someone's painted witch in her car, and I think you kind of mentioned it before, but how, like, when they go to other characters, like, you might see the setup of scenes, but they don't just, like, replay the same scene. So, like, I like when we get to is it Archer, is that his name,
Josh Brolin's character?
It's like when we get to him, like, we see how he gets this paint, and then we see him, like, seeing Justine's car and stuff, but, like, Cregger gives us enough what do you call it? Like, he recognizes that we can put two and two together. Like, we, like, he doesn't need to spoon feed us and show us a scene where he's like, I'm going to write witch on her car. But like, I respect that.
A simple shot of the paint cans in his truck, where it was all it needed to just be like, oh, he went over and did that in the moment. It wasn't even like a planned thing. It was just a spur of the moment, because he did follow her to see where she was going because he was suspicious of her. But when she left the car, it was like, okay, shot of paint cans, you know what he's going to do, right? You don't have to see the whole thing play out.
And I love that, like, I guess Justine is, I feel like a lot of characters get equal, screen time and stuff, but Justine does kind of feel like our main character. But I do like that, she is, like, pretty flawed herself. Like you said, like, she's obviously kind of, dealing with, alcoholism, and, like, I like that they kind of bring up. Sorry.
I was gonna say, it is. I was want to point out that it's not clear just from this moment that she's got a problem, because she she does pick up 2 bottles of booze, but you kind of get, okay, she's having a really rough night. But it's elaborated on as it goes on, where when we see her at a bar waiting for Paul to show up, a little bit later in the story, she's drunk, and he even says, "Did you drive here?" And then later on, we hear the principal say that she's had a DUI. No, actually, it's Josh Brolin who says that when he's talking to the police chief. And then, so there's like these things throughout. And then when you find out Paul's actually been the Alcoholics Anonymous, and you find out that she's been kind of enabling him as like a bad influence, you sort of realize, like, okay, she's not necessarily a monster, but it's definitely fitting into this theme of, like, oh, she is retreating to alcohol as like a crutch. Like, every time, like, things are getting rough, she's just retreating to the bottle. And, so, like, I think, that's like setting up some key themes here, which I think, we'll get really interested when we get into the later stuff. But the other thing I wanted to mention, though, about Justine's sort of opening segments here is when she gets back to the house. This is where I just felt like, oh, this is the barbarian director. This is like, oh, the knock at the door, she's scared, looking out the window, there's no one in the street. She runs out with, like, I think some pepper spray or something at one point. And all of it's just really tense. It's just all really well directed. Like, Cregger, if nothing else, and he has a lot else, but if nothing else, he knows how to pace these tense sequences and how to edit them and how to draw the suspense just out of simple moments of, like, I don't see if someone's there or not. And so many movies try and do those moments, and so many movies are just forgettable and make nothing of them. But all of his scenes where he does those moments are very memorable.
Yeah, and like, not to skip ahead too much, but like one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when she's basically doing like a stakeout in front of
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's where she
yeah.
falls asleep in the car.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that entire segment is like, maybe out of like just like pure direction, that might be the most impressive sequence in the movie.
Yeah, like I just love the house itself is so creepy, and like every time the door opens, and like you just can tell that there's not someone opening the door. It's just like, like
it
the house is opening itself, and then yeah,
well,
that one scene where you see.
it's a recurring motif though, the door thing, where the door opens and it's always just this rectangle of black darkness. Like you don't see what's about to come out of the darkness, so it's always a bit of suspense before whoever it is walks out. And this is the first time it happens, which is the mum of the house. We'll get to who all these characters are in a bit, but and she comes out kind of like I don't know, like
She's like stumbling, like
yeah, but she's got her hand up holding. I thought it was a knife at first. Obviously, it turns out to be a pair of scissors.
yeah.
But she's sort of like walking, like it's kind of like halfway between zombie and puppet, where she's kind of like walking, kind of stilted and weird. And
Yeah.
but it's like a single take or a single shot of like her out of focus coming towards the car the whole time, and then eventually you just hear the back door open, and I'm like, Justine, why are your doors unlocked? You fool! What are you doing?
Yeah.
So you sit there for like a good 10 seconds of like, this crazy looking woman's in the back seat of the car and we can't see her. It's nail biting, Tim. And then obviously she just reaches out and like cuts a bit of her hair. And then later on we get context for why someone would want a bit of her hair. But that's all it is. But obviously you get the tension of the scissors going near the face, and it's like, oh, but it's a very creepy, very well done sequence.
Yeah, it just like it keeps you on your toes like the whole time, because it's just like, oh, we're just always focused on Justine, so we have no idea where this lady's going, what she's doing. And it's, yeah, like you said, like we know she's in the car, but is she getting ready to attack? Is she like what could possibly be going on? And then yeah, and then it's almost creepier that she just takes a lock of her hair, because you're like, oh, well, now what the hell is she gonna do with that?
Yeah, because part of me was like, oh wait, is she going to just hide there, and like Justine's going to be driving, like after she wakes up, and she's going to like jump out all serial killer like.
Yeah.
I don't know, like where's this going? Because at this point in the movie, we still didn't really have a solid idea of what the rules were or what exactly was happening, and that stuff is all fleshed out as it goes on. But we're still very much in the mystery, because this is still Justine's segment, so she has the longest segment, but it's still relatively early in the grand scheme of understanding the story. So, so there's all that suspense of her in her house, and like a lot of her segments about wanting to speak to Alex, the one kid who didn't disappear, because we didn't really mention that earlier, but there's 17 kids disappear, but there's one kid in the class, number 18, who's still there. And Justine really wants to talk to him, but she keeps being told that no, you shouldn't, because everyone suspects you of things. And also, because this is where it's revealed that because he's like, hey, you do things that are kind of inappropriate, and they're not even that bad. Like when she says, oh, like a kid was left without a ride home, I gave him a ride home. It's like, okay, I can see why like teachers would have a rule where they don't do that, because just in case like there's like like accusation later, or it's just like it's off school grounds, it gets murky and whatever, even though it face value it's just a nice gesture of like, I'll make sure the kid gets home safe, but rules and all that. But so it sets up the character, and it establishes that she has a history with this character Paul, who's a police officer, who's going to be one of our characters that we follow. So there's all this stuff setting up. Anyway, I said we were going to maybe look at the umbrella of the whole thing before we get too far into the nitty gritty of each character's bit.
Sure.
I think it made sense to start with a little bit of Justine's stuff though, just because so much of that is right at the start. Because I think one of the things that this movie does really well is that Justine's stuff is like, she's proactive and she wants to investigate herself because she really wants to know, and it teases the house, which she's obviously looking at, and it's weird because there's all these newspapers up in the windows, and there's that great jump scare where she's sort of looking in, and her eyes just go up to the couch, and there's just two people sitting there still.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great little moment. So you've got that, and Alex is still going back. This is Alex's house, the kid who survived or didn't go missing. and he's still going home, but once he goes home, he doesn't come back out. He's not answering the door. What's going on in that house? Like, it really builds the mystery box of what the hell is happening in that house. What's going on? So what's so good about the way this movie's structured is that, like, so she comes at it from that angle, but when we switch to Archer, he becomes a lot more like, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like they're both investigating, but he investigates in a very kind of like, you know, like he's triangulating, he's like looking at like, you know, mathematics, and he's trying to like think about it logically, you know?
Yeah, he's almost more like a conspiracy theorist, and she's more like a detective or something.
Yes,
Like,
but neither of them are actually detectives, just to be completely clear.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. She's more stalking someone, where he's like, yeah, try to put all the crazy codes together to try and figure out what's going on. So anyway,
and he's a really fun character, which like it's kind of interesting because I like when they do this where, you know, he's almost set up like you might think he could be like a potential villain or something. Not that like he had something to do with the kids, but something that he might, you know, like, well, obviously he starts off as very antagonistic, but I don't know, like the more we see of his story, like the more I, you know, like grew to like him. Like, even if he is like an asshole or whatever, like he is being very proactive and actually like, you know, finding clues and solving stuff, and then actually ends up, you know, helping, you know, like Justine and stuff. And so I actually grew to like his character quite a bit, which was interesting because, you know, he starts off seeming like, oh, like this is gonna be like one of the like such a hated asshole at the beginning.
yeah, I mean, he's got reasons to be in a bad mood. I think it's fair to say.
For sure.
And you're walking that fine line, because there's that scene where he goes to the police chief and he's like, hey, have you looked into that teacher? Like, you must look into her, blah, blah, blah. And the police chief's like, look, I get why you're here. I will keep speaking to you. I'll keep giving you this time every time you want to come and speak to me, because I get it. But we looked into her. There's nothing suspicious. There's nothing that. Like, I disagree that she has to be involved. And he's like not ready to believe that, of course. And I think this is still technically before that school meeting, because then it's after that where he follows her and writes the thing in her car and all that. But ultimately, one of the things that a lot of the parents here have is they have those cameras on their front doors, and he like he's watching he's watching it obsessively, where he's like watching just the footage of the kid running into the night, and it's just this creepy visual. Which actually, as a parent, Tim, weird question here, right?
Yeah.
Right. So let's say this is a dark question, but let's say one of your kids is kidnapped, right?
Sure.
Right? And, you know, either you have footage of it or you don't, whatever, but there's just that assumption that some bad person has taken your child, obviously horrible, horrific, all the rest of it for all the obvious reasons. But is this creepier to, like, would you be more unsettled if your child just walked out the house and ran into the night and to never to be heard of again? Like, is that more unsettling than just there's someone to blame?
I mean, I would think so, because yeah, like at least before, it's easy to, even if you don't know who the person is, you can put the face on something of like, okay, like, yes, a bad person did this, and, you know, we can research it, and, you know, we can hope to find some type of forensic evidence or whatever, or, you know, people will recognize them, like, you know, and then you're kind of hoping that they're out there somewhere. Whereas this, it's like such a mystery, especially since it happened to, you know, like a whole classroom. Like, if it was just one kid, it'd be like, wow, this is really weird. What's going on? What's happening to other ones? It's like, yeah, you'd just be at such a loss. So, yeah, I think, yeah, they just really like stumbled upon like just a great premise, you know, for a movie. It's so like, it's obviously like terrifying, you know, it's like a parent's worst nightmare, but it's also like weird and creepy. And yeah, it is hard to say like, okay, I don't know what I would do in this situation. It's just so odd.
Yeah. So yeah, he like basically is like, wait, what direction was my son running? And he's kind of like, you know, and we see that he's sleeping in his son's bed every night. His relationship with his wife seems to have deteriorated. So, you know, it like, we don't really get into like if he has like any addiction problems per se, but it does kind of feel like, you know, he keeps saying, oh, I failed my son, I failed him. I think a big part of this movie is also this idea of parents failing their kids, and often through addiction. We'll talk about the subtext when we get, you know, talking about all the ending stuff, but you know, he goes to like another set appearance. This is where we get our what's his face, Justin Long's like cameo from Barbarian.
Cameo, yeah.
But like, we do a thing where he comes up to the house and he asks the woman, he's like, "Hey, I'm so and so's dad. Sorry to drop in on you, but you've got one of the cameras like we do, and obviously you showed it to the police like we did. But would you mind if I have a look at it?" And the wife is like, "Yeah, I would mind." And she, she just shuts the door, and it's this cold moment. And he just waits in his car. He's having his Subway, right? He's got some lunch, and he's just waiting for the dad to come home. He comes out, and he comes up to the dad and explains who he is. And it just does a smash cut from like, when he says what he wants or implies that he wants something to the dad showing him the footage. And this is actually maybe the first proper genuine laugh in the movie, where the camera just pans over and the wife is standing there just staring daggers at her husband because she already said no to this. But he's like, "Yeah, come on in, look at the footage." It's a whole thing. Anyway, so he basically is like, okay, so this kid went in this direction from their door, my kid went in that direction, assuming they're going in a straight line, where does that intersect? Where are they going? And that becomes, and sure enough, like Alex's house ends up being the thing that's in that radius. So, but he's trying to figure things out. He's trying to get to the bottom of various things, and I like that because it was almost like we kind of like find out different sides of the mystery from different perspectives, in a way that it gives us a fuller picture as we're watching the movie, and that's always fun if a script can pull that off. And I think that was like the fun of this movie, on top of just the scares and stuff.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like the way they dole out the information, like it's like little breadcrumbs, and like you're piecing it together, and then it's interesting because just the nature of the film. Like one character is figuring something out, and then a completely different character will get another little piece on their end, and then as an audience it's just exciting to be like, okay, yeah, they don't know what this other person knows, but like we're starting to put it together in our head, going like, "Ooh, okay, like this is fitting into this," or
which is why it's really exciting when two characters finally start sharing information, because you're like, "Oh god, they're going to like immediately start getting some answers together out of their pieces that they can fit together." So the one thing, so it's these first two characters that both have a dream sequence, and I think his is very good, because his actually is what provokes him to look at the footage and like do the triangulation thing, because he has this big sequence where it's clearly a dream where he kind of like wakes up in his kid's bed and sees his son leaving, and he follows him out, and he follows him to basically just like a mirror version of the house. And this is actually where this is the moment where I'm like, wait, what's this movie's title for? Because he looks at the house, and above the house is a giant floating assault rifle, just like above the house in the clouds. And I'm like, wait, where's this movie going? What's going on? And it's basically just his subconscious telling him that these kids have been turned into weapons, or someone is weaponizing people. But it was a really weird visual to see. But I like this dream sequence because, one, it's always clear it's a dream. There's no like whatever. I also like, though, that obviously he at the end of this dream sees something very similar to what Justine sees in her dream, and that lets you know that there is like a through line here. It's not just like they're both scared and having weird dreams because they're in bad places. No, there's some kind of unifying force, whether it be supernatural or something that's causing this, is making them see the same kind of thing. And at this point, I was just describing it as creepy woman in Joker makeup was kind of like the what my head was calling her at this point.
Yeah.
But because Justine's, I think, is a little bit weaker in the first half of the dreams, because they do the dream within a dream thing with her, right? So the first layer, I think, is fine, where it's clearly a dream because she's at school at night and she's coming out of the class and she sees the creepy kid, and it's all right. It's when she wakes up and she's in her bed, but then she looks in the ceiling and there's the creepy. It turns out to be Gladys, but she looks up and sees her there. That was the one where I was like, okay, that one was a bit generic. That was like a generic jump scare. Oh, wake up, you're not really awake yet, kind of thing. But
yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna deny that. Yeah, it's maybe a bit more generic, but I don't know. It was still like effective, for me. Like, I definitely wasn't expecting it, and then it'll be interesting to rewatch this for a second time, because once who Gladys is, it's very different than these first little glimpses of her, because they're so quick, and you don't really know exactly what it is. Like, it looks like kind of like a clown, but it's also like I don't know if there's like some weird demonic thing going on. It like has this like bright red hair and kind of like pale skin, and it's so quick. But I was like, oh, I don't know. When the first little couple of glimpses, I was like, oh, I don't really know exactly what that is, but I do think it's creepy looking. And then yeah, I'm curious rewatching it, and like once you know who she is, like how if it'll get a different reaction or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I do appreciate though that like because they both see the same kind of face in their dreams. I'm like, okay, this isn't just random. There's some kind of like, whatever's done this to these kids, whatever's made these kids leave, has left kind of like almost like psychological breadcrumb that's like infected them, and they're kind of like they're close to it, so they're having these like visions of who it is, kind of thing. So I appreciate that element of it, but I do think that all of the real world jumps and like tension are all better than the dreams typically.
Sure.
So it's luckily it's not like a recurring thing throughout the whole movie, but and obviously as you get towards the end of his stuff, where you see that he's like kind of messing up at work and stuff because he's too obsessed with what happens to his son, and he's looking into stuff. His section ends with him seeing Justine out at the store because it's like a gas station. And he goes to like confront her. He's like, "Oh, this is my chance to go and talk to her." And he goes up, and she's like, "Oh, really? I don't think we have anything to say to each other." And he's like, "Yeah, I think we do." But obviously, the important part of this scene is that she looks off to the side, and running towards them is Marcus, the principal, Benedict Wong's character. But notably, he's running with his arms kind of behind him, like the kids did when they ran away from their houses. And he looks, he's got like sort of black goo kind of like dripping out of his mouth. It's kind of weird. And he's basically...
His like, eyes seem like really large, like they're almost like popping out of his face.
And he's just like running straight at her to the point, when he gets to her, he tackles her. And this is, I think, one of the things about what makes Archer likable is that, he immediately like, wait, he tries to pull him off her. He's like, okay, obviously I've got beef with this woman, and I want to like drill her for answers and like get like he's clearly kind of harassing her, but he's not like a violent person or whatever. He immediately tries to pull this guy off of her, and we kind of end here with a cliffhanger of like her running into the store, and like this is kind of where it smash cuts to the next character.
Yeah, I just think they do like a good job of. At first, it seems like he's like a threat to her, and then like it pretty much like switches sides where you're like, oh wait, no, he's like, I mean, maybe still a threat or something, but he's obviously like not like so crazy out of his mind or whatever that he's gonna let like someone attack this woman, and then he actually becomes like a fairly good ally.
Well, I mean, the shared experience of this and how weird it is, but also the fact that he helped her out is going to be what like allows them in later parts of the story to kind of like, okay, maybe we should talk to each other, maybe we should share information, like I've seen some creepy stuff, you've seen some creepy stuff, because ultimately when he shows the map and says, hey, like they would ran in this direction, she's the one who's like, wait a minute, that kid Alex's house is right there where you're like circled. That's like right where it is. So that's obviously much later in the movie where they're ready to go there. But like, because that's the thing, the movie's a cock tease because it gives you this big moment with Benedict Wong. I
was just gonna say,
and then it doesn't cut to his chapter. His chapter comes like 2 chapters later. We cut to Paul. I think it's the officer next. Yeah. And because it was teased when he spent the night with Justine. She's like, oh wait, is this about Donna? And he's like, oh, we're not together. But when we get to his section, he's literally on the phone to her, and she's like, oh, I'll be back home, so tell my dad we can go to lunch with them for their anniversary. And I'm like, you sound like you're in a relationship, Paul. Just to be clear. And honestly, him having to go and tell his he's not his father-in-law yet, they're not married, but like her father, his girlfriend's father, is the chief of police, who we already saw in Archer's storyline. So there's kind of almost this recurring, it feels weird to call it a gag, but where he has something bad to go tell him, where, whether it's because he's punched someone and it's on his dashboard cam, so he's like worried about that, and he's like, not father-in-law is like giving him advice about it. Or later on, once Donna's found out that he's cheated on her, which that was one of the scenes with Justine that was out of nowhere, is that you think, it's really well shot actually. She's back at the store and she's walking in to get more booze, and behind her you just see out of focus this woman like coming up behind her, and eventually when she gets to her, it turns out this isn't an angry parent. It's not someone that's related to the crime or the kids going missing. It's Paul's girlfriend who one we later learn is like very supportive of him going to AA meetings and is like concerned about him like staying on the wagon. And in this scene, she opens a bottle of booze in the store and starts pouring it all over Justine. Clearly, is like a sort of, you like, this is what you are. You're an alcoholic. Have this kind of thing. It felt like it didn't just feel like, oh, it's what was on hand, so it's what she was going to use. It felt more pointed than that. Like, no, this is like, you've encouraged this. Yeah, you've got a problem too. You've just not admitted it yet, kind of thing. So, yeah, Donna's crazy. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny with like Paul's character. I guess in a way it's kind of like the opposite of Archer, where at first it starts off like thinking he's a likable guy, like because he's meeting up with Justine, trying to comfort her, and then and we like Justine, so we assume that like, oh yeah, he's probably a good guy and stuff, and then he certainly ends up being one of the more despicable people in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like, he's not evil, all right, but there's enough just like, unlikable things about him. Like, because like I say, like, it's really funny when like the chief of police like clearly has learned that he's cheated on his daughter, and he walks past his window and he sort of glares at him, and it's it's like one of maybe the funnier moments. But Paul's story is largely to do with this character who turns out to be named James, and I remember that because I think he's the next chapter is James. But he sees him try to like get in a window in a building, and he's this junkie just looking for stuff to steal so he can get his next fix. And he chases him down, bit of a chase sequence. But he gets to him and he cuffs him, and he's like, "Look, I'm going to search you, right? Are you carrying a weapon? Are you carrying any drugs?" And then specifically says, "Are you carrying anything that will stick me if I search your pockets?" And he says no. And he searches his pockets, and sure enough, he jabs himself on a syringe that's in his pocket, and he freaks out a little bit, to the point where he just punches James in the face, even though he's already handcuffed. And it's right on his dashboard cam. It's right in front of the car. And he's like, he sort of realizes afterwards, and he kind of feels like he's a little bit of a weasel, as Paul, where he's like, "Oh no, I've kind of messed up here. Oh, I'll disconnect the camera now, but what good does that do?" And he basically just goes to James. He's like, "Hey, the way I see it, I did you wrong. You've done me wrong. How about we just don't report this, and this can all go away, and I'll just give you a warning. I better not see you here again. Off you pop now. Off you pop."
In reality, like, it's a pretty dark storyline, but there is kind of a humor in it, like the way it's shot and his reactions, and then he's a piece of crap, but then he does get his comeuppance. So like getting the little prick the first time.
The first time's not like that funny inherently. It's when he sees him later in his story, and he's been through all the stuff with Donna and that, and he's feeling pretty bad, and he sees him walking around again where he chases after him. And of course it kind of pivots. Well, we don't get to see all this yet. It was not until James's part of the story we actually get to see this. But eventually when he catches up to him in the tent after James has had a creepy moment where he sees Gladys in the woods, which is like the first time he's really properly see her, where he basically tries to defend himself by like picking up like 4 of his syringes, and he just holds them in his hand, and he stabs at whoever's coming through the tent, and it turns out to be Paul, who gets stabbed by like 3 or 4 syringes in the face. So he's got these like little holes in his cheek. And that was funny because it was like a follow-up to the previous one, because it was like, oh, he got jabbed the first time and now he's been jabbed by 4 syringes. And he's like, when he gets him back to his car, he's like, "Hey, if you got AIDS, just tell me. If you got AIDS," he's like, "I don't think so. You got hepatitis, anything like that?" He's like, "Not that I know of." I was like, it's like, obviously it's a horrible thing, and everyone, like, I mean, Connor's scared of needles. He's going to love this movie. But that was all entertaining. But obviously, I mean, that's basically where it cuts off in Paul's story, is him chasing after. It was when he sees James again and chases after him, and that's when we go to James's chapter, and it cuts back to what he's been up to, try to score loot,
which surprisingly very like entertaining. Like I I I think like beforehand I probably wouldn't have been like super interested, like, oh, like why we like it's very interesting, the structure of the movie, because yeah, we're so wrapped up in this mystery, and then all of a sudden we're following, like it's almost like a cartoon chase, like
Mm.
between this, like, cop and this junkie, and it is like just such a weird departure, but then it ultimately ends up just being so satisfying because I like the way their stories intertwine. I wouldn't have thought this beforehand, but like James ended up being like one of the like the most entertaining characters. Like he's like very, like he ends up having like some really funny lines, and then his story's like interesting, and then I feel like it starts to give us some like serious answers, once he
Well,
makes his way towards the house. And
yeah, I mean, James's character ultimately was never going to investigate anything. He's the one that's going to stumble into something because of, other reasons. So he's trying to rob places for stuff to pawn. He tries to pawn, like, he's just opening car doors until one opens, and he finds like a kid's tablet that he tries to pawn.
that's a great scene where like he's on I think he's like on the phone talking to, I assume maybe like his mom or something, like where he's like asking for money for like a suit for a job, but like just as he's like talking, he's just walking down the street, just like trying to open each car door he can find until like one finally opens, and it's like ooh. But yeah, that's just like a lot of like good little stuff like that he's doing.
Yeah, but he ultimately ends up, after the first time he encounters Paul, where he's like wandering, he's looking for places to, and he sees the house, he sees the creepy house that obviously we've already seen Justine look into, and he climbs up, gets in the window, it's pouring rain at this point, and he just starts robbing the place. And obviously there's a good little scare as well, where he like turns and sees the two people just sitting there on the couch, again, just not moving, just sitting there. He also comments that like some of their tech is too old to pawn because they've got like a super old video game system or something like that under the TV. And like was it a VHS or a DVD? But it was like what was the movie?
It was Willow.
It was Willow. That's what it was. Yeah. But yeah, so he's doing all this stuff, and basically at some point the two people, or Alex's parents, but we know that from later. They stand up, and I love how this is shot because they stand up out of focus in the background when he's just doing something. So it's a really just silent, creepy moment. There's no music sting or anything like that. It just happens visually. Great stuff. But he ends up sort of struggling and like whatever, and I think he runs down to the basement at one point. And when he looks down at the basement, you can just see vaguely in the darkness, oh, there's 17 kids just standing down here. They're all just standing down here like statues. And it's like a creepy visual because it's very Blair Witch because they're all just standing still. But also you're like, oh, they're just here. They're just in this house and like, the stuff.
Yeah, like I knew something was weird going on in the house, but like I immediately wasn't like, oh, well, the kids surely are there. So I, that was like a nice little like revelation, like, oh, and then and with that little like bit, like you just suddenly realize like, oh, this is why this character is important. Like this is gonna have some significance.
And sure enough, when he's at the pawn shop, because he gets away, he sees the poster that's like, and he saw it the first time he was there as well, but it's like the kids are like, hey, $50,000 reward for someone who can bring us vital information on these children. And he's like calling up and going, can I get it in cash? I don't like police stations. Can you come and give it to me?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
this is pretty funny.
Going to be more of a process here. But clearly he decides that he cares so much about the money that that's actually why Paul sees him again, is because he's walking towards the police station, presumably to try and get his reward money. And his bargaining chip when Paul chases after him, and not to gloss over the fact that when he's being chased, he has that whole creepy section in the woods where he sees Gladys like rising up from the grass and smelling at him, which is super creepy. But when Paul gets him, he's like, hey, I know where those kids are. I know where those kids are. He's like, wait, what? Are you messing with me? He's like, no, they're in a house. So he takes Paul to the house, and Paul goes to the door, but we kind of stay from James's perspective in the car. He's handcuffed in the back seat, and you just see like Paul go into the darkness of the door. Again, that image of the rectangle of darkness over the door is. He walks in, the door shuts, and then it's nighttime. We've cut later. Paul's coming back out, but clearly he's changed. He's kind of like Marcus now, where he's like a mindless drone. And he just grabs Paul and just sort of drags him into the house. And that's kind of where I think we wrap up his chapter.
I think what's interesting is like each person's story, it always ends on like a really high note. Like it's always like this big piece, and it always kind of cuts off right before
Yeah.
like something big is gonna happen, but it never feels like you're being cheated or like, oh man, I wanted to see that. But it just makes you more excited to be like, oh, I can't wait to find out later like what happened with that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it always leaves you kind of hanging, like, oh god damn it, like the stuff to go. And this is when we can finally go to Marcus, and I didn't actually know his name, so I was like, Marcus, who's Marcus? And then I was like, oh, BD Wong's character. All right, okay, right, okay, it's him. Right, we're with him. Or Benedict Wong. BD Wong's a different person. So
Right.
you can see how Benedict would be abbreviated to BD though, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, so Benedict Wong is he's doing the principal thing, and whatnot. And the big thing is that at one point during the first part of the story, Justine basically officially put in like a welfare complaint because the house was so weird and creepy, and like and he has to take that seriously. There's protocol here. He has to at least talk to the parents and kind of assess should someone investigate like this from a welfare perspective, like a child care perspective. So he like basically calls in the parents. But instead of the parents, we get Gladys, who still looks weird. She's got this really, like, ridiculous, like, ginger wig on. It's got a really kind of straight fringe. And, with the red lips. Like, everyone thinks she looks weird. Like, I mean, they don't say it, but they all have this look in their face of, like, you are a weirdo. But, he sits down very politely, and she explains that she's the aunt because the parents are sick. And he's like, oh, well, you're not the legal guardian. I have to talk to them. I really would rather just, I don't think there's anything going on here, but there's been a complaint put in. I can't say who made the complaint, but like I have to speak to the legal guardians. And she's like, oh, why don't you come by on Monday or, whatever the line is. So this is where we get our first proper look at Gladys, right? And we get to actually hear her speak. We get to see how she interacts with people. And this section's pretty short because ultimately what it builds to, we see him with his husband doing some shopping and whatnot. But the big thing is that they're at their place, and I suppose we have to do a little tangent about this ridiculous lunch that they have, which is his husband makes like a tray of like there's some crisps or chips for the Americans. There's like a big bowl of dip of some kind. There's a bowl of carrots, but then in the bottom half of the tray is just a row of about 8 hot dogs. And I'm like, there's 2 of you. Why do you need 8 hot? Like they're not like super long hot dogs, so I could get eaten maybe 2, sure, but 4 each. Like, assuming it's an equal share, I don't know. Maybe the husband's having 2, and then Wong's just downing 6 hot dogs. I have no idea. But this is like it's like this weird combination of because it's presented very neat on this tray. It's like gay couple meets like jock at like a sports game. Like there's like a weird like intersection of like just absurd. I don't know. I don't know what to say. But the shot of this tray of food was just it made me notice it. Okay, I noticed it.
Yeah, it's funny because it would make sense if they were they were having a big like sports day, like it was a football game, and maybe they're having some friends over or whatever. But it's not. They're just like watching a documentary about parasites, which that's another kind of recurring like theme in the movie. Like they, at one point they come to the classroom and they're talking about like parasites, which seems like kind of a weird lesson for like 4th or 5th graders or whatever.
I had a weird flashback actually, because at one point in the class, this is an Alex's section because you see more of just all the kids being there, but their books that they're using, it's just a bunch of clocks, and clearly all they're doing is writing down what the time is. They're learning how to read time on the clock. And I'm like, oh god, that's like a weird like deja vu, like because I remember doing that when I was like 7 or something, like that being like a day and just seeing like all these clocks in the textbook. But I don't know. Anyway, so Gladys shows up at their place, and the husband's like really nice about it, and he's like, oh yeah, come on, have a glass of water, yeah. Whereas Benedict Wong clearly is like, this is kind of like a breach of privacy here, like like you can't just show up to my house. There's like the whole like professional lines that are in place as a teacher, like clearly he respects that for himself as well, where I don't want parents and guardians like coming to see me at home about their kids. Like, that's weird. Like,
Yeah.
this is my private life. This is separate. But the husband's been very nice about it. But she asks for water, and she specifies a bowl and says, "Oh, it's just a quirk of mine. I don't even question it anymore." But then she clearly does witch stuff. She pulls out like some of the threads that Wong had in his office. Right, he had these ribbon things up, and she's like sort of wrapped these around with some kind of twig, and then she like takes a little locket of the husband's hair. Right, and they're kind of freaking out at this point. They're gradually getting more concerned about what's happening, and then all she does is she cuts herself onto the twig, so there's some of her blood, and then she snaps it with the hair, and immediately Benedict Wong turns to stops doing anything. Like, I think that there's two like stages to it. There's one part where he just stops, but I think it's when she eventually snaps it where he just turns and starts beating his husband to death. Mostly via headbutts. He headbutts a man's face in. It's pretty visceral and violent. It's fair to say. This is where it earned its 18 because it's an 18 rating in the UK, and like up until this point in the movie, I was like, "There's nothing here that's that violent. It's just been spooky and like tense and what, but it's not." And then this scene happened. I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, the BBFC." Do not like headbutts, and they especially don't like headbutts when it's like a person's face is getting caved in. But he also vomits black goo all over him. But at the end of this scene, she pulls out a blonde lock of hair and says, "Oh, we know where that came from because we saw that hair be cut." She wraps it around, she snaps it, and Benedict Wong just runs out the door and just is like a honing missile is just running through streets and streets until he gets to her, and we kind of like link those parts of the story back up.
Yeah, I like the way that they convey like how she's weaponizing people, and again, I think it's just like respect for the audience where she never feels like she has to lay everything out and be like, so as a witch, I've discovered this spell where you could take this stick and wrap someone's belongings. Like like we understand what she's doing and we see the effects of it, and then it's important to get because like we see it done a couple more times throughout the movie.
It's a classic example of showing and not telling, and letting the audience understand that it's well explained visually. It's just not elaborated on with a bunch of exposition or anything like that, and that just makes it feel nice. It makes it feel, and obviously by this point, by the time you're seeing her break this stick and all that, you're like, oh, this is a witch movie. This is about a witch, and that was like, oh, this is cool. We don't get a lot of good witch movies, so hey, that's nice to add another one to the. That said, though, the other hint early on, although apparently this is also the AA symbol, but when the title came up at the start, inside the O there was like a triangle, and I thought that looked a bit witchy, like a bit like like a symbol, like
a symbol, like
a ritual or something. Little did I know that it was going to be so directly just a witch, later in the movie. But also worth mentioning here in this scene, her main kind of goal for coming here in person is to just make sure that the principal, Wong's character, has not reported to Child Protective Services. He's not run it up the chain. That's what she's making sure of before she has the husband killed and then sends him after Justine. So I mean, Josh Brolin gets hurt trying to fight this guy off. Eventually she gets in her car and like he literally just like runs after the car. Brolin's like in pursuit behind him, and then the whole thing comes to an end because a random car at an intersection just slams right through the principal and breaks him into pieces. You see like his torso hanging out on the road once we slow down to see it.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I like that we don't just cut to him like when he's about to attack Justine. We actually like kind of get like a it's quick, but like a little thing of him like running all throughout the city, which I just thought like was funny, and like you're not really like seeing people's reactions for the most part, but you're kind of like hearing like people going like, what the hell, like what is this going on? I just thought that was funny. And then another line that made me laugh was so clearly Justine is in distress, and she's being attacked by this guy, and then Josh Brolin is attacking him, and like there's just this crazy fighting going on. And then I like the the store owner or whoever that's working there. He's just like get out of my store. Like I think he says like get out of my store, and then like Justine yells at him like, they're just like then like effing help me, which is like I think is like I don't know. That's so funny. It's just like, oh yeah, the guy is like not even concerned that this woman is like trying to be murdered. He's just more concerned that like they're trashing his place.
Yeah, and they do that thing as well where it's like obviously Josh Brolin like pulled them off of her outside, but even in the store she gets cornered at one point, and Brolin literally does the dive in to save her at the last second. So he does a couple of heroic moments here. So when it cuts to later on after the cars hit the principal and they're at the hospital, she waits for him, which is obviously a big change from like trying to avoid him and not wanting to talk to him. She wants to thank him, and it's kind of awkward, but it's like, okay, clearly something's going on here, and like, you were, he was trying to kill you, he was like a weapon, he was just beelining for you, that's weird. But the big detail, because she's like, oh, it was strange the way he was running, and he's like, yeah, I've seen that before, and he's like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, that's how, like, I've got footage of my son running that night, like, that's how he ran, so obviously that's where they form a link, and this leads to, like, him getting the map out, and she, like, spots, where the house is, and it leaves it off there. That's where we cut away, because she's like, oh, that's Alex's house, and he's like, what? And it's like, yeah, Alex so and so, and it's like he realizes that that's the kid that didn't disappear, and that's when we cut to the title card, Alex, and we get his story, which starts a good few days before the incident happens, and sets up and explains basically everything. And I think this is where a lot of the meat of the movie really comes into it in terms of the subtext. Like, it's been there, we've had multiple characters with addiction problems, which lead them down the paths where they ultimately meet their demise or where they get taken over. But like, I think this, because I think Zach Cregger's talked about how this section's very like autobiographical, because he grew up with alcoholic parents, and how a lot of this idea of like, this aunt coming to visit and then it almost immediately taking over the parents into this like zombie-like form that she's controlling them with. It's very much like he has to feed the parents, he has to look after them. It's like a child who has to kind of grow up really fast because the parents aren't taking care of themselves. Like, that's what a lot of the subtext was here. So I like that, and obviously there's a lot of sadness here of like, the first day we see him, like his dad comes and picks him up from school, but the second day after he's been taken over by the aunt, he's just like waiting at school. There's no one there. He has to walk home. It's all, sad and kind of lonely. And honestly, the most disturbing part of the whole movie is kind of this idea, is he's like getting more glimpses of her, and she's clearly sick, she's clearly dying. But she makes these threats, and she's like, hey, she's got the mom and dad at the table, and it's like, Alex, you're not supposed to like tell anyone about me or about your parents resting like this. You're not going to tell anyone, right? And Alex isn't agreeing to that. So she makes the parents start stabbing their own faces with a fork, and it's genuinely one of the more disturbing scenes that I think I've witnessed in a movie in quite some time. It's very visceral, it's very dark, visually because of the violence, but even just on like a psychological level, the idea of like, I will make your parents kill themselves if you don't do what I say, to like an 8-year-old, is super dark. Like, that is like heavy stuff. And the kid is like forced to like look after them and feed them, and whatever. And from a plot perspective,
he can only feed them soup, which is, I don't know, it was just like a weird like gross detail, like, or just the way like the soup would like dribble and fall out of their mouths and stuff.
Yeah, I think that was an intentional choice as well, because when you imagine like feeding an old person who like can't really move much, like you imagine it being soup because they can't chew, so it's, you get that kind of you get the dribbles down the chin and all the rest of it. From a plot perspective here, the big thing though is that she kind of reveals to him when she's like doing her things, and she's got like a it's not a bonsai tree, but it's like a little tree where the twigs are coming from that she's using for all these spells. Which again, the movie doesn't explain, you just see it, there you go, that's where they're coming from. That's not a question what the rituals are, that's just, we've established how they work. But she's like, oh, I'm sick, and I thought that your parents would make me feel better, which suggests that she was like stealing the life force from them or something akin to that.
Like a parasite.
Yeah, like a parasite, exactly. But she's like, but it's not enough. And he's like, oh, well, would the hospital help you? And she's like, no, but you know what may help me? if you could bring me an item that belongs to all of your classmates, and that's where the movie like, because the movie's clearly established that to do like one of these spells on someone, she needs to have something of theirs, whether it be a lock of hair, like a pendant, whatever it is. So he's actually given this task because he's promised that if she gets better, that she'll leave and the parents will be given back to him. So he's doing this as this sort of desperate attempt to like fix this problem. And if you look at it as an allegory for, parents with like addiction problems, it does feel really helpless. It's like, oh, this is really sad because it feels like there's no hope for them. But yeah, there's a whole sequence where because the first time we see him in school, he's kind of picked on by a couple of kids, and I thought, oh, is this going to like, not so much like Alex is an evil little shit or anything, but maybe when like she suggests, oh, is there any kids you don't like? Maybe he'll say something that he later regrets, which is like, oh yeah, I hate them all. And that's like, why she like takes the whole class or something. And that's not what happens. He does it under, duress. Like he's not choosing this. Yeah. He's not wanting to hurt anyone.
Like she has like that very pointed line where, when she's like describing it, he says like, if I do this, will you leave? And she's like, I think I would. Like, yeah, I think I could leave after that. Quick question too. I don't know if you thought about it, but in the back of my mind, I was wondering if she was even really their aunt, or because clearly she's a witch, she has powers. Like I was kind of wondering if she could have just like inserted herself into these people's lives, or if it was actually, like she was related to him. I guess it doesn't really change the story, like, in any way, but that was just an interesting thing I was thinking about.
Yeah, I don't think it matters too much. I mean, they say it's been like 15 years since they've seen her. So, and she's sick now with no hair. So it's possible she's just taken this woman's identity and like, she looks so different and old now that they wouldn't even, it's the mum's aunt is supposed to be, like, maybe she just wouldn't be able to tell. But maybe it is just her, maybe she is just part of the family, and, which makes it even sadder in a way that she's exploiting her own family in this dire way. But yeah, I mean, obviously he ends up taking all their name tag things from the class. What was interesting about this is that we actually get to see Justine finally be a teacher before all the bad stuff happens, and just see her actually be kind of a nice teacher to the kids. Like she clearly, puts in the effort. She wants to help them, that kind of thing. It's nice to finally get a glimpse of that after she's obviously been on the aftermath of like not being trusted and no one wants her around their kids. That was actually another bit of tension for me early on. That I'm thinking about it is when she was like watching Alex from her car and she wanted to go and talk to him. I was like, oh, I'm so tense about this because like people are so suspicious of you, like unfairly as it is. People are suspicious of you, so you going up and talking to the one kid who didn't disappear is not going to look good, and that was making me get that sort of cringy tension where I'm like, oh no, like someone's going to see this, and like
absolutely.
So yeah, obviously it plays out. She does her ritual at 2:17 in the morning. All these kids run to this house, go into the basement. They kind of cover some like potential plot holes here, where they're like, okay, this is how she kept up appearances when they were questioned after the fact, and she made Alex say various things. They said that she claims his dad had a stroke and that's why he's sitting there all quiet. Like, just going through, like, they did this, like, this is why they're, they had the kids go somewhere else for when the police would come by to just have a look around the house, just to explain why that was never caught. Just kind of covering some of these things up. But she's clearly thought about, like, how this is going to be investigated and how to cover her tracks. So I mean, yeah, all of this was really fascinating. Like, you get excited as soon as you realize, oh, we're going to get the story from his perspective, because he clearly knows stuff. Everything about the mystery of this house and the mystery of what's in here is such a big part of what the story is. And then eventually, of course, that ends up syncing up with, where we left off with everyone else, which is we got Justine and Archer outside in the car, and they're like, okay, this is the house. This is weird. But Gladys knows they're out there, so she sends Zombie Paul out. Again, the door opening, just the black rectangle. He comes out and just kind of waves them in, and they're kind of like, wait, what? I guess we'll go then. Like, it's kind of weird. And by this point, Gladys has set up like salt lines around the house, and it's like, oh, what happens if you cross the salt? Turns out it's like a trap where if you cross the salt, the people she's got sort of guarding, her drones, if you will just attack you. So we get this scene where both Paul and James are just standing there like zombies, but when Justine like crosses the salt, they run to attack both her and Josh Brolin's character Archer. So that's going on, and then the kid upstairs, Alex, decides that he's going to try cross the salt to get to his parents, which makes his parents charge him to try and get to him. So we get Alex running from his parents, who are now a danger to him, which I guess also feeds back into the subtext of like, at a certain point, are parents with addiction problems a danger to their kids? And this is making it literal, where they're actually chasing after him to kill him. So the big climax of the movie, though, is that Alex gets into Gladys's room where all her stuff is, and because he's seen her do the magic before, he basically grabs one of the branches off the little tree. He gets a bit of Gladys's hair from under her wig, one of like the loose strands that are still there, and he cuts himself, and he basically snaps it with her hair. And the big climax of the movie, and we'll talk about some of the fighting that was going on in the meantime, but like the big climax is that all of the kids in the basement chase after her through the streets. It's now morning by the time that happens, and a bunch of people like witness this chase. And this is where it was kind of funny, obviously, because it's just kind of ridiculous that she's so scared, and these kids are all just running after her until they rip her apart with their bare hands. So there's a lot to unpack with all this stuff, but give your general feelings here.
Yeah, no, I love this ending so much. Like, I was laughing so hard. I mean, it starts off pretty funny, because I don't think I was necessarily expecting the kids at first, because I thought like, oh, I wasn't sure if like, the parents or
I was kind of thinking
something.
I was thinking all of them, like they would all just turn on her, and that doesn't quite happen. Instead, the parents and because I think by this point, because there's a whole bit where Archer's kind of dealt with James, and he like sneaks down into the basement and he sees all the kids. So there's a whole thing where he's looking for his son, and there's a jump scare because Gladys is waiting. That's where she's been hiding. She's like waiting in the corner, and she grabs something off of him, and obviously does a spell to him, so that he then starts being the one to attack Justine. So when she is killed, he just kind of snaps out of it, and he's mostly fine. Whereas the parents are kind of like, they stop trying to kill their son, but they're kind of like empty vessels.
Yeah.
And the kids are kind of like that as well. So it's kind of like all the spells are broken, but it's kind of like they're too, like, I think the implication I got is that because Archer just had it happen to him, he came back pretty normal.
Yeah.
Because it was only a couple of minutes. But these kids are kind of traumatized for it. And that again, that fits into the subtext for me, because it's kind of like, oh, they go through this traumatic experience, they'll never be the same again. Like they'll never be able to recover. Like, the final line of the movie is the narrator kid comes back and says, I heard some of the kids started talking again. Some of them started talking again, but they're never going to be quite the same. And Alex's parents are never the same again. They're apparently living in a care home or something, because they're, like, things have went down this path.
But it's just so, I mean, obviously, like, Cregger is just really good at, delivering all of the horror stuff, but I mean, he still has these, comedy chops, and I really wasn't expect like how like loony it gets, but yeah, like when he snaps like the twig, just like there's two things going on. Like, one is Gladys's reaction is so funny. Like, I mean, again, it's very like cartoon or like sitcom or something, but like she knows what's happening. She just is like, uh-oh, and then she starts running
instantly.
And then,
like, her head snaps to the side, and she's like, oh no.
Yeah. and like the way she's running, it's like, like very over the top, and like, she's like this little old lady in like a nightgown. But then the other funny thing is you just start hearing the rumbling, and then this like explosion of kids, and every time the kids just like burst through a wall or a window, made me laugh. Yeah. And it's
there's a really good bit during the chase where they do like it's not the whole chase, but there's a bit where they do a winner like behind like one of the girls, like the girl in the front of the chase, basically, who's the closest to her, and it's like over her shoulder as she like goes around some corners and jumps through a window, and the camera stays. But now I assume that it's actually like a small stunt woman because we're watching from the back and she's jumping through a window, but it's a really well done shot, and I'm like, this is a kind of absurd in an amazing way that I'm watching a child like have like a Jason Bourne style chase sequence where they're running through a window to get to this old hag.
So, and I was listening to a podcast interview with Zach Cregger, and he said originally the plan was like she'd basically run out and the kids would chase her and like grab her on the front lawn of the house and basically just like like eat her there. But then he decided, I guess like a little bit before filming this like the scene, that he's like, oh, let's try to like extend it a little bit and like have him go through a couple of different houses. And I'm so grateful for that call, because it goes on so long, but it never like was not just pure delight and joy for me. Like the longer it went on, the funnier it was getting and the more absurd it felt, and like they're running through people's homes and stuff. Like
it's it's the character getting comeuppance. Like she's the evil one, she's done this to everyone, people have died as a result, these kids are traumatized forever, so she deserves comeuppance. I think it's like I'm off two minds about it in some ways, where I'm like, I like how it is, and I do think it's very entertaining. But part of me also wonders, but what if she got comeuppance, but it was dead serious? Like, what if it was like more grisly and whatever? But I get it.
Yeah, it is interesting because there have been some funny moments throughout the movie, but it is fairly serious and creepy. So I do think it is quite a tonal shift, but I don't know. It's one that just worked like more for me, and I don't know. It still feels like it's in the world, but it was also like unexpected.
Yeah, Barbarian did a similar thing where the like I say, it's more pulpy and there's definitely more funny stuff right at the very end of the movie as opposed to the rest. It's almost like Cregger, at least so far, is a bit of the opinion of like, okay, you make the audience feel tense as shit for like 90 minutes, give them 10 minutes at the end where they get to just kind of like laugh at themselves a little bit and enjoy the comeuppance. But not to gloss over though some of the fighting stuff that's happening when like Justine's been attacked by Paul, because when she's been pinned against the fridge or whatever, she like reaches for whatever she can and she picks up a potato peeler and starts peeling his skin off of his cheek like she's shaving him. It was a cool visual. It was pretty grisly. I was into it.
Yeah. That was a nice bit of gore, and then I forget exactly what like Archer was doing with James, but I just remember having some like big laughs at like how many times James popped back up. I feel like you keep thinking like
that was the main thing. It was just he kept knocking him down and he just kept getting back up again. There'd be a second would pass and I'd be like, and he's like, oh, he's back.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I dug it. It was a nice bit of like that actual fight. Like it felt tense, and then I was a little worried with like Archer. Like I didn't think he was gonna kill Justine, but I wasn't sure if she might have to kill him. Again, like the tensions were mounting.
Yeah, because by that point she's killed Paul. She's shot Paul in the head to take him down. So, and I think she ends up shooting James because James is still coming after, repeatedly coming after people. Right. So she ends up shooting him too. So it's like I think there's a lot of chaos here, but I like that it's Alex who's the one who kind of has to try and fix things. It's like a whole next generation is maybe going to fix it, but I do appreciate though that like this idea that these kids are all screwed up because of like what some parents did, or what at least one person did at the very least, but. It does kind of feel like, the reason why they're not just instantly better. Because, part of me thought that's what was going to happen, is that as soon as she's dead, they're all going to snap out of it and be like, oh, where am I? Why am I not in bed? Like, what's going on, Dad? But no, they're kind of traumatized, and it kind of feels like, no, like, this is the idea is that this is going to linger. They're not just going to be normal again.
It's kind of funny because it is a pretty dark ending, but like the lead up to it was so comedic with the children like chasing this woman down and then like ripping her apart that like you're not really leaving the theater being like bummed and going like, oh man, that took a lot out of me, that was sad, when in reality it is actually like pretty dark when you think about like, oh, these people either aren't going to be the same or it's going to take them a long time to recover. But I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, and those themes of addiction run throughout. Obviously, we've got multiple characters who go to the booze really quickly, and it's brought up in a way where it's a problem. We have characters who are literally a junkie who's doing, I don't know, crack, meth, I don't know, drugs well enough to know assume what he was doing. But and even the witch, like, I think her, like, she has an addiction. She has an addiction to life, as strange as that sound. But her, that idea that when you have an addiction that's so strong that you screw over your family to try and feed the addiction, like, that's effectively what she's doing. In like her story, is she's screwing over these people and even not caring about the kid to get what she wants so she can keep living, to get her fix of life force. And that's also why I think it makes sense, like, just forgetting the subtext, why the kids and, like, the people who have been, like, the parents who have been zombified for too long, why they don't come back, because the implication from her is that she's feeding on their life force. So in theory they should be lacking life force, if nothing else. Yeah. So they should be kind of like broken and not really sure what to do. So yeah, it's dark, it's fun at points, but if nothing, mostly it was just really well directed and suspenseful throughout. And I enjoyed the revelation, oh, this is the witch movie. And because of the slow build to her, and because of the mystery building up to it, it made her feel like an important, like, character. Like, if you just start a movie where there's a witch, it might feel like a bit goofy. It might feel like a little bit, oh, we're doing a witch story, she's doing an incantation, she's got a big cauldron or whatever, blah blah blah. But because you start off with this just horrific, weird crime of kids going all missing on their own, and you, like, draw it out and you build, and there's weird things happening that are really tense. By the time you get to the reveal that, no, there's a witch at the center of all this, instead of thinking, at least for most people, I think, oh, this is goofy, you think, oh no, I've seen what she's capable of. I see how horrific she can make people's lives. So she's got the credibility. She's got the it factor by that point. So it really builds her up. And in a similar way to the witch, where it being this mysterious entity that we never quite see, who's influencing the main character, makes it a lot more foreboding than just having someone with a hat on who's going ha 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 ha.
I also think, like, it's a pretty interesting, unique spin on it, where it's not like she's turning people into frogs or like shooting lightning bolts from her fingertips or something. It's like, oh, like, she's weaponizing people. Like, that's an interesting idea that and I was kind of delighted when I started figuring that out in the movie, because again, I didn't really understand what the title was, because you didn't know much going into it. So I thought it was going to be something where, I don't know, like, each person was going to have, like, their own type of weapon or something that they used, or I mean, I think, like, the most obvious thing is, like, you have a movie called Weapons, and it's about kids in a classroom going missing. Your mind kind of goes like, is it a shooting kind of thing? But it's a much more interesting idea. And again, that can fit, like, with a lot of themes where how people can become weaponized.
Yeah, and not as and obviously here it's very literal because it's a movie and it can make it literal. But the idea being that children especially can be used as a bargaining chip, can be used as a weapon,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Against another adult in some way, or this idea, oh, we're doing it for the children, think of the children, that's like a very political move. It's like, oh, we'll justify this censorship, or we'll justify this this horrific thing we're doing to silence an entire group of people, out of the think of the children mentality, like, so
absolutely,
yeah, it makes sense. Good themes, good subtext, it's creepy, it's well directed. I think the story comes together really well. I feel like if you're not going to love it, it's maybe just because the pivot to being a little funny in a couple of moments towards the end might be the thing that turns some people off. But other than that, I don't know what would hurt people for this one. So yeah,
I mean, there's always gonna everyone has their own taste, so there's always gonna be some people that don't like it. But I mean, at least as of right now, it seems to be doing fairly well, have a good
it's making the money. And Warner Brothers having a weirdly good year for horror movies, like,
right,
both critically and financially. Final Destination Bloodlines is Warner Brothers, made a lot of money. People liked it, we were pretty positive. Sinners was Warner Brothers, made a lot of money, pretty positive. It's probably going to suck, but I imagine Conjuring: Last Rites will make money. So
I keep forgetting about that one.
yeah, they're doing all right, and I mean they're doing all right in general this year, but the horror specifically, like they just keep knocking out these low budget horror movies that are making a lot of money. But Jason Bloom from Blumhouse is in shambles. He doesn't know what to do with himself. All of his movies are bombing this year. All right, Tim, what are you rating Weapons out of 10?
Yeah, I just had an absolute blast with this one. I mean, again, like you said, like the beginning was maybe like not even like bad or anything, but you're just kind of like, let's see how this is gonna go. But again, that's just like a few minutes. Like it very quickly just like settles in to what it wants to do and sucks you in as a viewer. The characters are all captivating. The structure made it really exciting and kept you on your toes, and it was just a great way to like learn the information. And then there's legitimately creepy parts. There was surprisingly funny sections of it. So I really don't have any complaints. I'm real happy that we have another very strong outing from a director I already liked, but I was already on board with him, but it's nice to be even more on board where it's like, all right, cool. I'm already very excited for the next thing he's gonna do. So I'm gonna go very high, but I think I'm gonna give it a 9. I really don't have like many complaints about it. It might even go a little bit higher on a rewatch or so, just because again I can't really think of like much negative I have to say. But yeah, it was another fantastic outing. It's been a pretty good year for horror movies. I've been fairly happy with like, I mean, obviously we've had some stinkers, but we've had like some like really really good ones that are not just like, oh, that was a solid 7 or 8 or whatever.
There's always going to be stinkers. There's not even any point in like saying that drags the year down. It's really just a question of how many good ones did we get. Because there's all, I mean, if we watched like everything that went on Tubi in a year, like we'd be like swimming in absolute garbage. So yeah, I mean, I like really like Barbarian. I thought this was arguably even a bit better than Barbarian overall. Like I think the story came together in a much better way. I might like argue that the opening half hour of Barbarian, like I like as an extended single thing the most, in terms of just like the constant suspense and like who, can you trust this character? Can you not? Like, all that stuff is so good at the start of that movie. But I think this one, all the pieces come together in a very satisfying way. That I am debating in my head between an 8.5 and a 9. That's kind of where my brain is for this. And I think I'll know for sure on like another viewing sometime in like a year or whatever. But I think I'm going to say 9. I think I'm going to say 9.
Wow.
I'm going to agree with the 9. That's been Screams After Midnight, everyone. Next time on the show, it's a little up in the air, but the hope is we'll actually be able to do Weapons next episode. So all goes to plan. Tim gets to the theater away from the
we're gonna do it again.
Oh, sorry. Did I say Weapons? I meant together.
Yes.
I meant together. Together is the plan for next time.
We like Weapons so much. Let's go do a second round.
I love the idea that every time Tim's going to the theater now, he's going to run out of the house with his arms like behind him, like he's going to run like he's been drawn somewhere by a witch. But so the plan is together. Obviously, we've got another thing recorded if for some reason that falls through. We've got backups, but the hope is we'll get together done next week, because Tim has still got some showings. The UK is getting it this week at the time of recording, so hopefully we'll be able to do that. But yeah, as per usual, thank you for joining the show. Thank you for liking, subscribing. All those things help out a bunch on YouTube. Rating the show on Apple or Spotify, wherever you're listening. Drag that average up. It's always good to do. There's always that one person who gave it 1 star that's making us look bad. So Lift it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can support everything by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or by becoming a YouTube member, and you get bonus stuff. You get the bonus even more Scream segments, which are pretty much there's basically like a bonus attached to every episode these days, and we fit in bonus episodes of the show when we can. We are planning on having one sometime by the end of August, start of September. We're basically committed to doing one before we start focusing entirely on October episodes, because once we start focusing on those, we're not going to be thinking about anything else. But yeah, there's a whole back catalogue, there's bonuses for other shows, but more importantly, you get to make sure the show keeps coming every week. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.